Hey there, I'm Mark, in affiliation with Spectrum Pulse, and yeah, summer's here, more K-pop demon hunters, and it's Billboard BREAKDOwn. I don't remember. Yeah, I don't know how to say this nicely, so I'm not going to bother to be nice. 2025 has been one of the worst years for the pop charts I have covered in 11 years running this show, and thus far I don't see how the summer is really about to disrupt that trend. I know there's a lot of hype because K-pop Demon Hunters has broken through a bunch more songs, and I'm not going to make a broad assessment on quality for a film that I haven't seen, but you all recognize it's only happening because there's so little competition on the Hot 100 right now, and that the running story of this year is how so few new arrivals have any sort of sustainability on the Hot 100 that it might just be a blip for a couple weeks because we need to give a bunch of sour, ossified junk more advantages. Right? But you know, enough about the most recent budget bill passed down in the United States that's going to screw over millions of the working poor to give more tax breaks to the richest Americans, where they're not even bothering with the trickle-down framing or narrative to sell it because the propaganda networks have just lied or ignored talking about all the consequences, and they believe it's in your best interest, dare I even say your holy duty, to suffer in this life because you're lazy and stupid, unlike all the tax break billionaires. But yeah, I'm off topic. The top 10. Where a song called Ordinary by Alex Warren is perched at number 1. I could launch into another rant about how if I was running a propaganda normalization campaign, I would use the milquetoast pop soul track borrowing its aesthetic from Christian rock, literally called Ordinary, even if the text of the song is about their love totally transcending that, y'all. But it's also a massive global hit, and I wouldn't believe that of Alex Warren, and truthfully, as dominant as it is on the radio, it's also running sales with high streaming. This is apparently what the people want. Speaking of which, What I Want by Morgan & Wallen and Tate McRae holds number 2 thanks to dominant streaming, even as the radio is painfully slow to get on board, with Just In Case up to number 3 on slightly weaker streams but far better radio, where in both cases the relationships are cheaply disposable and everyone winds up degraded. Also kinda telling. Alright, I'll stop, although I totally understand why critics love to map a current cultural malaise to the art that's popular. It's shockingly easy and cathartic to narrativize, if only to add some structure to this inanity. Can you tell I'm kinda cranky right now? Especially when next up is a bar song Tipsy by Shaboozey up to number 4, even as the radio slowly dumps it. There was good streams and a really strong sales week, and I'm the Problem by Morgan Wallen at number 5, which is slightly weaker radio, but actually had a better streaming week. You see with what I'm dealing with here? It kind of maps out in a twisted way. Now, thankfully, the conjecture breaks down with the quietly aspirational Luther by Kendrick Lamar and SZA at number 6. It's running on radio inertia for a slow decline across the board, but it is interesting that Man-Child by Sabrina Carpenter fell to number 7. I honestly thought it would have more momentum given said cultural climate, see my review of it a couple weeks ago, but it looks to be losing on the margins as streaming falls back and radio just isn't pushing it fast enough, because Sabrina Carpenter still has multiple songs in circulation. So naturally, Lose Control by Teddy Swims gained a slot to number 8 because despite radio losses, it had a great streaming week. Y'all aren't tired of this yet already? Come on! And where I actually have to correct a mistake from last week, where I didn't mention that Die With A Smile by Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars was in the top 10 at number 8. It lost a spot this week to number 9 as part of a general decline, but I rarely make positional mistakes in the top 10 coverage. My apologies there. Finally, and I guess the one bit of good news, Pink Pony Club by Chappell Roan actually clawed back to the top 10. I don't expect for long a final radio boost for Pride Month, maybe, but let's give it up for a little bit of joy and hope, even if it doesn't last. We'll see. And that naturally takes us to our losers and dropouts, where again we saw 2 big songs exiting in the latter category. Both are going to clinch the year-end list for 2025, those being TV Off by Kendrick Lamar featuring Lefty Gunplay, and Cry For Me by The Weeknd. Yeah, I'm as shocked as anyone that it had as long of a run as it did. It was a stable radio hit. I guess I didn't expect one from Hurry Up Tomorrow, certainly not that. But this was actually a surprisingly busy week for our losers, and let's start off with the residual Morgan Wallen. 71, Superman at 52, Dark Till Daylight at 79, Eyes Are Closed at 100. Then we saw any album traction fading rapidly for Lil Tecca with Dark Thoughts at 63 and Oh at 84, along with any gains for Twilight Zone by Ariana Grande just evaporating at 83, and Latina Forever by Karol G losing hard off the return at 80. Then as expected, we had the considerable losses for our new arrivals. Outside by Cardi B at 26, 6 months later by Megan Maroney hit 40, Bodies by Offset and JID just couldn't get traction at 91, and This Heart by Corey Kent hit 92. The rest, well, a bad week for Fuerza Regida with Marlboro Rojo at 75 and Mijalo at 97 with Grupo Frontera. The rest just feels scattered. Party For You by Charlie XCX lost momentum at 68, similar for Typa by Glorilla at 70. Bloodline by Alex Warren and Jelly Roll just isn't getting much going at 76. And EO by Bad Bunny somehow has not yet been moved into recurrency despite it being well over 20 weeks and falling to 88. Come on, Billboard. So what's replacing all of it? Well, a lot of new arrivals, but before we get to those, we did have a couple returns, like What Was That by Lorde at 85, riding some album traction, and The Giver by Chappell Roan scraping back at 43. Not fully sure why with the latter, probably tied to Pride, as well as alongside a big physical shipment, probably just, again, a last burst of performance. But the big story this week is K-pop Demon Hunters, as both songs that debuted last week saw huge gains. Golden up to 23, and Your Idol at 31, which you can chalk up to consistent streaming and shockingly big sales. I'm still on the fence about the whole thing, we'll get into it throughout our new arrivals, but I can smell a cultural phenomenon taking advantage of a really weak chart environment. It's Encanto all over again. That's really what's happening here. But before we get into those in a lengthy list of new arrivals, we gotta start off with number 99, Bar None by Jordan Davis.
Say you and your memory one, me in this bar none. Me in this bar none.
At this point, when it comes to Jordan Davis, as much as he started off riding the coattails of Sam Hunt, I think his career might have actually shown more stability and longevity. None of that means the music's good, but I figured it was worth highlighting. And yet with this, honestly, I like it more than I thought I would. The choppy, sandy acoustics around the banjo against the gentle groove is pretty likable. And for a post-breakup drinking song where Davis seems acutely aware that it's not helping, but it's pretty much the only thing he can do, where she's just running up the score by moving on and he's going nowhere, I found it pretty effective. Now, I'll admit the groove and percussion could afford to sound a bit more organic, but I think the real issue here is, unsurprisingly, Jordan Davis himself. He didn't write the song, he's a very limited vocal presence as it is, where if I'm being charitable, the lack of expression could feel realistic, but it could also well be a weak performance. Either way, yeah, you know what, I'm gonna call it decent, but give it to someone besides Jordan Davis, you could have had a lot more. All I'm saying. Number 95, Went Legit by G Herbo.
Life still lit. Riding down the strip, $500,000 whip. 5 M's for the kid for ice like this. Everything I want to hit, I scratched them off the list.
It's been a while since I've seen G Herbo show up on the Hot 100. I would chalk some of that up to legal troubles, although maybe it's a factor of the dearth of mainstream-ready Chicago hip-hop since Lil Durk ran into his own issues and also stopped being remotely good. Either way, this is a single verse that dates back to last December. It's just over 2 minutes long. Against that shuffling Chicago rap knock with the soulful sample and touches of guitar around the piano, with a lot of blunt gangland flexing full of stacking cash, drug running, violence. That's also kind of all it is, though. There is some novelty in that we don't get nearly as much of this as we used to 4 or 5 years ago. I think a lot of the cases help some rappers keep the street out of their bars, if only just for plausible deniability. A little bit surprised that G Herbo brags as much as he does about beating those cases with so many gangs getting shouted out. But even in that context, I don't think there's a lot of wordplay or flair. It just doesn't seem all that interesting. Not bad, G Herbo's got personality, and the production's actually pretty good. Just not exactly memorable either. That's all. Number 89, Went West by BabyChiefDoit.
Ball on KFC tall like a tree, that whore get climbed. Got a couple comments, nigga, hashtag blessed. Now these hoes on my dick, cause I'm fly like a jet. They gon' be surprised when they see I made this beat, Baby Chief went Kanye West.
This is one of those cases where I probably should have been aware of BabyChiefDoit a lot more before now. He's another Chicago rapper, still a teenager with 2 albums already under his belt and selected as a XXL freshman this year, where this is his crossover breakout single. And yeah, not sure it's the best first impression. Although I put more of that on his production with the stuttering bass, piano, and synth horns. Apparently, again, he produced it and he coins it as going Kanye West. Hope it's just that, where there's this odd wheezy texture around the hook that's almost as distracting as how he stumbles across flows that really don't fall into any consistent pocket. He's as offbeat as often as he's on beat, and that's kind of a shame because he does have an interesting flow here with some character. But then you delve a bit deeper when he drops hashtag blessed on his chorus, and also says he takes girls' phones and fills them with dick pics, and if she talks smack, he'll put her in the pedigree, Triple H wrestling move, fun stuff. Or even if I think there's some potent observations about how fake rappers tend to live longer than those who are real like him, it's surrounded by this cranky complaining about women as he's too high and sloppy. I don't know, maybe there's more to this guy I'm just not hearing here, because I think there's talent, but the assembly feels really slapdash. Can't say I like it much. Not a fan. Number 82, Fuck With You by Toliver.
I wanna dance, baby, I ain't in no rush. I wanna fuck, which I'm tryna fuck. I wanna fuck, which I'm tryna fuck.
Hey look, it's a somewhat new Toliver song compared to those from albums years ago that catch a viral moment and stick around way longer than you would expect. Produced by Mustard, no less. But either Mustard phoned this in or the other producer, Guilt Trip, really fumbled this, cause man, I think the mix here is a mess. The bass clipping around the muted synth and fizzy synths that sound ugly and grainy, the vocal mix where the fidelity seems to deteriorate as the song develops, and even that's not saying much cause it's only one hook repeated twice with no verses. I'm honestly kind of startled. Toliver has grown on me over the years, but this is alarmingly messy and half-baked, where I wonder if it's late period Travis Scott rubbing off on him in a really bad way. Because it's not like the content's worth anything. Flimsy bragging, trying to take his girl out so they can fuck on a webcam. I don't know, there's a part of me that can't shake how this hook feels built for TikTok and little else, and it might not be the worst thing I've heard from Toliver, but it's one of his least competent. That's a concern. Number 77, Home by BigXThaPlug and Shaboozey.
That's where you won't be long. Highway. Oh, won't you take me home for a minute? It's lonely on this road.
Well, this reunion was very much expected. They worked together on a Shaboozey deep cut last year. Not exactly a favorite on the album for me, but maybe there was some promise. And now with this, okay, look, it's not perfect. The tempo shifts to accommodate BigXThaPlug's verses feel really clunky, as the trap percussion replaces the galloping rollick off the acoustic guitar and the banjo. But I don't know, between that smolder of the electric guitar and some really competent mixing to have the hook boom out with so much with the multi-tracking, it's really got one of the strongest choruses I've heard in a while. And I like the trade-off in the lyrics. Shaboozey sets up having to leave home to chase dreams and leave that ex behind, but BigXThaPlug is remorseful and lonely. He frames his verse as trying to reconcile, deal with his own ego, apologize, maybe even get back home. I think it's overlooked how much BigXThaPlug is a credible romantic in his storytelling, and he's got some real maturity. He keeps giving me more reasons to like him. So yeah, it probably needed another draft to fully smooth out some of the tempo issues, or BigXThaPlug could have sped up his flow to better match with Shaboozey. He's very much in a bit of a one-trick pony in this lane with his flow, but I think this has a lot of charm. Really good song. It's worth hearing. Number 64, Takedown by HUNTR, aka EJAE, Audrey, Nuna, and Ray Amy. Alright, this is a teaser before we get the full run of K-pop Demon Hunters, and one of the few songs that reportedly needs the narrative of the movie to make a lot of sense. I'm not sure I fully agree with that, though. Yeah, in context, it's the rushed song that the Demon Hunters plan to use it to expose those demons, only to further highlight how their own lead singer has demon blood herself, and said Takedown is as much about her, which you probably won't get through a direct reading of the lyrics, but that's also because in context, it's a pretty weak slice of trap and K-pop off the oily fart of the synth pulse and the filmy hi-hats, with very little in the way of cutting wordplay. Yeah, it's better produced than I expected with the bass mixing, and EJAE doesn't feel the need to overpower the track in her delivery, but the more glaring indictment is that it's a mediocre song intended to be so. I guess it kind of succeeds on that. I'm not going back to it. Number 60, On My Mind by Alex Warren and Rosé.
All across the sky, or maybe it's the way the times are changing, and I'm stuck in the middle, frozen in a fire. But baby, you're on my mind.
I'll admit I'm kind of bewildered by this collab. Yeah, Rosé worked with Bruno Mars, but there can be a throwback, elastic performativity to his sound that I did not expect Alex Warren of all people to have, and I had no idea if there'd be any chemistry. And the results is a little odd, but I think there's something to it that kind of works. For one, Rosé sounds really good in a more sincere and sweet lane, and there are decent harmonies with Warren if the vocal mix isn't as clear as it should be, and I don't dislike the content. Both are long split apart, where you can tell that Warren might still be holding a candle, but Rosé very much isn't, except in a singular beautiful moment when that person just springs to mind. My favorite lyric on the song is, "Our love is what it had to be." This isn't so much about racing for a reconciliation so much as making peace with something long past, and then remembering a great moment so you can move forward. I got a soft spot about relationships that are long done, but friendship and good memories stick around, especially duets like Remind Me by Brad Paisley and Carrie Underwood. Where I think this song might be a little strange, it's the production, and that it might be going bigger than it needs to. A nice acoustic build with a very well-balanced bass line, but the post-chorus drop with the hook, with the woos and the stomp clap feels more bombastic than it needs to be. And that's before they tack on horns and choirs on the second hook. A little bit more intimacy could have made this land a bit better. But still, I hear a lot to like with it, and what I've also realized is that all of Alex Warren's good songs aren't performing anywhere near as well as Ordinary. Kind of a shame. I'd like this to stick around. Number 58, Free by Rumi and JINU, aka EJAE and Andrew Choi.
What we're running from, we can't fix it if we never face it. What if we find a way to escape it? We could be
So this is considered the big ballad of the movie, where the half-demon protagonist meets up with the main demon antagonist in the boy band, where they need to find a way to cast off the shame and the guilt they hold in the past in order to move on. It's supposed to feel wrong to allow the connection, but it ultimately leads to a breakthrough, cue the final act of the movie. And as a glossy piano ballad with some whirring trap touches and guitar, it's fine, I guess. EJAE going for husky, softer singing, it is a better lane for her, and the vocal runs on the hook from her are nice, but I don't think she's got much chemistry with Andrew Choi's tenor. Maybe it's the vocal production that doesn't really blend well when he brings in his own falsetto runs, or how their voices don't quite balance out, but I also think he's got this level of boy band preening that doesn't feel as gentle as it needs to fit the atmosphere or blend with EJAE. Again, it's fine, but I've heard these pop trap ballads since the late 2010s. It doesn't feel all that special. All I'm saying. Number 55, What It Sounds Like by HUNTR, aka EJAE, Audrey Nuna, and Ray Amy.
just meet the light instead. Show me what's underneath. I'll find your harmony. The song we couldn't write. This is what it sounds like.
And now we have the ballad that directly follows as our protagonist tries to reunite with her girl group sisters for the final conflict, and I want to reiterate the issue I had with Golden. If you're setting up each girl as having their own arc, broken but better for it, finding strength and vulnerability, but you only prioritize EJAE's arc with only cast-off lines for the other two and measurably worse vocal production from both, the balance doesn't translate. If anything, it's worse here. Maybe it's the compression or the vocoding crushed into these ugly, filmy layers where the drums are louder than any actual melody. Kind of a shame because the strings are genuinely pretty when they build the crescendo. But I think the larger issue is that after that scratchy build on the second verse, we get a trap breakdown that's all in a minor key for the crowd vocals, and it doesn't feel nearly as strident or promising for any sort of comeback. It's weirdly sour. I get the feeling it could have worked with better production, but as it is, gotta be honest, not hitting either. Number 49, Soda Pop by the Saja Boys, aka Andrew Choi, Neckwav, Danny Chung, Kevin Wu, and samUIL Lee. So thus far, the record's shown the Demon Boy Band has better songs than the Demon Hunters, although I did have some friends saying this would probably be the song I would like the least from the soundtrack. And yeah, it's bubblegum and the whistling around the trap squonk and the overstuffed clinking all over the mix. It is pretty annoying. But what's telling to me is that the guys not only have better harmonies and land a pretty bouncy key change, the vocal mix isn't so overworked and messy compared to the girls. And I think the concept kind of lands too. It's a stupid little song about wanting girls to be their soda pop, which is just cutesy enough to obscure how lyrically these demons want to consume them and dominate because they're so empty inside. Again, it's not something I'd go back to. It's a glittery pileup that's trying to do a little bit too much, but I also think it works. Not bad. And finally, number 42, How It's Done by HUNTR, aka EJAE, Audrey, Nuna, and Ray Amy.
How it's done, done, done. Run, run, we run the town. Whole world playing our sound. Turn it up, how it's done, done, done.
No, if I'm gonna find the K-pop Demon Hunter song that actively annoys me, it's this one. The ear-splitting Indian-inspired melody alongside the blasting synth horns around the trap knock and the wildly overcompressed vocal leads that contribute to a post-chorus drop that feels imported from the most oversaturated EDM of the mid-2010s. It's very Blackpink in the full-force approach and flexing, although the Rambo reference is kind of bizarre and fitting in whatever universe this is. But it's also minor key and pummeling in a way that has me scratching my head in the framing about some of these songs going to that darker place, especially alongside Takedown, where I don't hear much differentiation. And I don't hear the broader split in sound and content. HUNTR are the cool girl badasses. I know it's intentional to have them not be so far removed as a foil to the demons, but the music being markedly more grating does not help them feel all that likable, especially when the song is set up as a K-pop flex to dunk on everybody. So yeah, I get the target audience that might like this, but I'm not one of them. This wasn't good. And yeah, that's our week. Can't say it wasn't interesting, but the best fell out fast. Home by BigXThaPlug and Shaboozey getting that top spot, with On My Mind by Alex Warren and Rosé as an honorable mention. You think that's surprising? Jordan Davis was nearly the runner-up. As for the worst, I don't want to give it to BabyChiefDoit. The flows just save him there. So dishonorable mention to Fuck With You by Toliver and the worst to How It's Done. The last one's just painful to sit through. And now the question will be if any of it lasts as we slip into the summer proper. Stay tuned to find out that. But until then, I'm Mark. You're watching Billboard Breakdown, affiliated with Spectrum Pulse. And I'll see you next time.